There's another all-important conversation happening in the public domain, and this is last week President Cyril Ramaphosa signing off on 3 important pieces of gender-based violence legislation. Now, the amended bills will allow for all sexual offenders to be added to a national registry. The new laws will also allow for the online application for protection orders to be able to be done online. And let's discuss then further with the CEO of the GBV Response Fund, Lindi Dlamini. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I mean, the move has been seen by some as a way to bolster the fight against gender-based violence. You agree?
I absolutely agree. And coming as it does at a seminal time for the fund, you'll recall that the president launched the GBV Response Fund at this time last year on the 4th of February. It is an absolute imperative, and it will really contribute to the fight against gender-based violence and femicide, eliminating a lot of the barriers that survivors face, but also taking away secondary victimization that a lot of survivors have as they navigate the justice system, seeking justice for having been violated.
And we look at one of the issues that is all important here when you read, especially through these pieces of legislation, is that the survivor, when it comes to their safety, this is an issue that it really takes into account, and they'll now be able to apply for a protection order against, domestic violence cases and all of that, and some of the perpetrators online. And it says that this should be a 24-hour process, which can even take place outside of the normal court hours without the applicant really needing to leave their homes. There's been certain problems that we saw with this process of, the protection order. Sometimes the law enforcement authorities themselves not being able to follow through with this particular matter. I wonder, how much faith do you have now that it might be done online?
Look, I have a lot of faith. I think the period of the last 2 years where we've been subjected to lockdowns and have gotten adept at doing things online has been a great testing experience that shows that this can be done online. It can be done timelessly. Relief can be received by a survivor who has applied relatively quickly. So I think one of the gifts of the lockdown and having to use online mechanisms has proven to be a good test case for saying that this can be delivered on in a timely manner. The ability of a survivor to obtain a protection order immediately. The danger is often on weekends, at nights, and so forth. And having no access to recourse is one of the big reasons why women experience secondary victimization, women, children, and other bodied persons. So I'm confident that it can be done. Of course, the proof of the pudding is always in the eating, but the fact that it's now a disciplinable offense for a SABC member to not act accordingly in terms of this legislation, I think further strengthens the case.
And it's also going to be interesting, especially when you look at the fact that now the prosecutors must place their reasons on record when they decide not to oppose a bail application. But I'd like us to move to the Domestic Violence Amendment Bill, which includes new definitions. I mean, you're looking at controlling behavior and coercive behavior, and it also expands existing definitions such as domestic violence to include spiritual abuse, something that has been a problem, elder abuse, coercive behavior, controlling behavior, among others. I wonder, in your thoughts, the expansion is going to then assist with even dealing with some of, what's considered abuse, but may not have necessarily found its way into the books of law enforcement authorities.
That's for certain a truth. I think for many members of society, people think of violence and abuse in the physical terms because the scars are there for everybody to see. But the emotional scars and mental scars often last far longer than physical scars. So it's important for the law to recognize the damaging effect of mental abuse, coercive abuse, behavioral abuse, and all of those non-visible forms of abuse that people are subjected to. Of course, there's going to have to be quite a bit of education to people to understand that these behaviors are actually abusive and you can actually get recourse where those are being visited on you.
And, you know, one of in fact, the part of the education also needs to go towards law enforcement authorities, because sometimes we've seen, even in some of these cases, where they say, no, this is just minimal, go home and, you know, be able to resolve this. Something that the police minister has lambasted, in fact, saying that they're not social workers and they should, in fact, deal with this decisively.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not only the education around the detail of the bill, it's the unlearning and resocialization of members of our criminal justice system, and in particular the South African Police Service. I am grateful that this has been recognized by the minister, because we do expect him to reinforce this in the ranks. We do expect to see an emerging understanding. This is, after all, Pillar 3 of the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence. So this was acknowledged a long time ago. Courts such as the Sexual Offences Court that's in Boysens, for instance, are some of the pilots that show how people should be, how SAPS members should be treating members of the public in these processes. So there's going to be a lot of reconditioning in terms of how they've socialized themselves, in terms of their own responsibility within the workplace. I think that there's a lot of hard work that still needs to happen there.
And very briefly, we're out of time. The delays as well, though, in the processing of DNA. When you look at such bills being put into place, the processing of DNA can take up to 18 months. That is also another aspect that needs to be looked into, because it delays justice.
It is a critical element, because for as long as the DNA isn't processed, and it's a critical piece of evidence ensuring that perpetrators are brought to book. I do know that this is an area receiving the highest level of focus from the SAPS. We are also partnering with them, together with partners in the forensic science field, to accelerate the process, because for as long as perpetrators are not brought to book, it results in impunity, and it means that victims lose faith in the justice system. It breaks the contract with the state, between citizens and the state, when they can't trust the justice system. So it is a critical one that needs to be accelerated.
All right. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. That was the CEO of the GBV Response Fund, Lindi Dlamini.